Raise your hand if you have a difficult time coming up with headline ideas, title ideas for your article so that people want to read them. In today's video, I'm going to talk about how to write headlines that'll get people to click and continue to read your content so you can actually build an audience with your work. I'm also going to talk about how to write headlines specifically for the website medium.com. See, Medium has put out some new guidelines for some of the things they want to see and some of the things that they don't want to see when it comes to headlines. So I'm going to talk about some of the new policies Medium has just put out, and then I'm going to give you the whole picture of what it's going to take for you to write headlines that people want to read. But before we get to that, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the little notification bell so you can get brand new videos the moment they come out. That notification bell is very important because it's going to help you get brand new videos the moment they come out so we can continue this journey together on becoming better bloggers. So first, let me give you my stance on the way I think proper headlines should be written. Then we will go and contrast that with some of Medium's new terms, some of their anti-clickbait policies, okay? Regardless of what Medium says or any other platform, when it comes to writing headlines, the goal of your headline first and foremost is to get people to click on your article. If no one clicks on your article, no one's going to actually read what you have to say. No one's going to be able to access some of the amazing thoughts, insights, and stories that you have to share if you don't have a window to get them in. So you got to think about the outside packaging, your headline, and just make that mental switch to realize it's just as important, if not more important, than the actual content you write. There are a lot of writers who they kind of scoff at the idea of writing headlines. They want to be creative and expressive, and they think writing headlines is robotic and blah, 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 blah. But people who write headlines that are good get people to click on them. People who don't get people to click on their articles. So let's go through a couple quick headline tips. The first thing you want to avoid is writing these weird, cryptic headlines, right? So I see a lot of people that will write some headlines that it doesn't even give you an idea what the post is really going to be about at all, or it might say what it's going to be about, but it's not giving you enough to make you answer the question, why would I even want to read this, right? So I always use this similar kind of example, but somebody will write something along the lines of, on my trip to West Virginia. Like, who cares about your trip to West Virginia? What does that have to do with me, right? You can make, for an example for like how to switch that up a little bit, could say 7 life lessons learned from my trip to West Virginia, 7 insights gained from my trip to West Virginia. I went to West Virginia and it taught me something crazy about life. Those are just spitballing examples, but you see what I'm getting at. You don't want to do cryptic headlines, right? The next thing you want to do is focus on either benefits that the story is going to provide or somehow allude to the content that's going to be in the article. This is something that's known as a curiosity gap, right? So you don't want to necessarily tell the reader exactly 100% what's going to be in the article, right? So for example, I wrote an article a while back that went really viral, and it was called 7 Psychological Superpowers That Few People Have. Okay, so now that would be an article that Medium would shut down for the headline, but looking at it for the purposes of explaining the benefits is that I put a little bit of a gap of curiosity. I didn't say what the principles were. I didn't say, name exactly everything that you were going to get. I kind of alluded to the fact that if you learn some of these psychological principles, you're going to have more mental capacity or ability to deal with people, right? You want to focus on fears and frustrations of your audience. Now, this is something I'm going to cover again in the next section, but a lot of people are looking for alleviation of their problems. They're looking for your content to solve their problems. They want to know by reading your headline that you might be able to help them. So those are some kind of things to think about when you're more in the advice or how to, or, a lot of these other blogging topics that deal with, kind of giving the reader guidance. But even if you're writing something that's not in that vein, you still want to think about clever ways to write headlines that are going to draw people in. So it could be some of the words that you use. I'll link to a tool called the AM Institute, and it grades your headlines based on the percentage of powerful, emotion-evoking words that are in your headline. You want to think about how you're going to paint a picture of what's in the article before the reader gets into it. So if you're writing a personal essay, how are you going to make the title for that personal essay make the reader want to click, right? So those are just a few things to think about when it comes to headlines. There are a couple headline frameworks that I still stick with that still work really well. I'll talk about translating them into Medium's new guidelines in a minute, but how-to headlines still work. And as I'll explain in the next section, you can actually still use those. List posts do really well. And there's a lot of different frameworks you can use for headlines that will tend to work well, such as there are posts that you can make where the post itself is kind of making a statement, and that statement might give things away a little bit, but it's still giving a reader a clue into what they're going to see next. So for example, I'm just browsing through some articles from some of my favorite writers and contemporaries, and one of my buddies, Tim Denning, he has an article and it's titled "The Brutal Truth About Newsbreak for Writers." So that was an article about a platform called Newsbreak, and it's basically going to give some tips and advice to writers about how to use the website, but the headline is kind of making a statement that's alluding to something, but it's not the how-to or the listicle style. So those are some of my thoughts on how to write headlines, and now I'm going to talk about some of Medium's policies and some ways you can get around them and still write headlines that people want to read. I'm actually going to link to Medium's article about their new clickbait policy, and basically what they're trying to do is keep people from writing overly sensationalized headlines that don't match the actual content of what the writer is writing about in the article. So some things off the top of my head I can think about are examples like, "This is how to 10x your productivity next week," or "How to make $6,000 in the next 6 seconds," or "If you don't do these 3 things, you're going to be broke and miserable." Words like "you must do." They have a policy in there about not instilling too much fear and hysteria in your headline. So you might not say something like, 7 mistakes that are going to totally derail your career. There's a lot of different examples like that, but basically you want to avoid the excess, unrealistic promises, things like, "This one little trick will cure your belly fat." Basically at this point, any specific promises that you can't back up. So making a certain amount of money, reaching a certain milestone, different things like that. So they're trying to get people away from, honestly, a lot of some of the different techniques that I used to teach. I don't necessarily agree with every single thing that Medium has to say about what constitutes clickbait and what doesn't, but I'm going to do my best to fit in with their guidelines and talk about some things that you can do too. So a couple things that I've tried lately is just kind of switching, varying some of the different words that I use in my headlines. So instead of writing an article title that says, 7 things you must do to be a successful writer, I might say something like 7 things you can do to become a more successful writer. Instead of writing, this one trick that'll make you more successful, I might say, a proven psychological technique shown to increase your productivity. Instead of writing something along the lines of, follow these 3 tips and you'll live the most amazing life ever, have millions in the bank, I might say, here are 3 things you can do to increase your odds of being more happy and fulfilled. Instead of having super wide curiosity gaps where I might write an article that says like the secret to being successful, that'll probably get DQ'd, but maybe I would, say something along the lines of subtle mindset shifts I made to be more successful. Talking a lot more about some of your experiences is something that they're looking for. So I just published an article with an editor recently, and they shifted it kind of from me using the word "you" in the headline to talk about recommendations. Instead, put the word I in the headline and talk about the things that I did to solve the problem. And then kind of underneath in the subheading, I put something along the lines of, here's how you can do the same too. So a couple things to think about when fitting in their guidelines. We're not going to deviate totally from what makes a successful headline, because if you water down your headlines too much, you're going to run into the same problems. You want to go to that edge, and you're going to have to experiment with writing your headlines, and you're going to have to experiment with putting them on Medium and seeing whether or not they get curated. So this is what I'm doing right now. I'm writing articles with, similar headline styles, but I'm trying to match them a little bit, knowing that Medium is gonna like some of them and curate them and promote them, and knowing that there is gonna be some trial and error, and there are gonna be some ones that they're not favorable to. So I'm gonna continue to adjust, and with my teachings, I'm gonna continue to adjust my lessons that I give to you over time. But the ultimate recommendation that I can make for you is to write more headlines. I've been writing headlines 10 a day for the past 6 years. So that's something like 20,000 headlines that I've written to get as good at it, as I am right now. So write 10 headlines a day, look at Medium's guidelines. I'm gonna link to some resources both for myself and from Medium about how to write good headlines and how to fit their standards, and continue to write on, and you will find success on the platform. That's it for today's video. Make sure to like the video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit that little notification bell if you haven't already. There are a bunch of resources you can check out below. There's a free 5-day Medium course that'll teach you the ins and outs of what I know on the platform. Get on the list. I'm coming out with new information, both in the videos and in the list, that are going to talk about keeping up with Medium and its evolving changes. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you on the next one.